hosted by you, Security Storyteller. Our story is called The Scissor Man. I first heard the story when I was 8. I was having a sleepover at my friend Matt's house and it was getting pretty late, to which my friend suggested we go to bed. When I asked him to stay up a little longer, he replied with, "We can't. The Scissor Man will find us." "Who's the Scissor Man?" I asked curiously. "He's the ghost of the school groundskeeper who kidnaps and murders children," Matt replied, wide-eyed. I raised my eyebrows in palpable fear and a trickle of morbid fascination. I wanted to know more about this. The story has apparently been circulating around my town for years, and yet for some reason I never heard it before that night. Matt proceeded to tell me the story of the Scissor Man, which goes as follows. Years ago, there was a groundskeeper in our town's elementary school whose name was long forgotten. He was a silent and scary-looking man, only speaking when he needed to scold misbehaving children, so all the kids started avoiding him. He would often be seen with garden shears, cutting grass and trimming the hedges around his small home. He lived just off the school grounds in a small house. Kids would often hear the snipping of his shears before seeing him appear, hence the name Scissor Man was given to him. Stories started circulating about how the Scissor Man killed his wife with his shears and escaped to our small town, where he decided to lie low and escape the police. However, more sinister stories started emerging soon, about the Scissor Man kidnapping and brutally murdering the school's children with his shears. At first, those were just rumors, scary stories to tell around the campfire, but soon children actually started disappearing. 1, then 2, then 10. In a small town like this one, even one disappearance was a nightmare, and since the police had no solid evidence to pinpoint a suspect, the townsfolk took it upon themselves to bring justice for the missing children. They armed themselves and marched to the Scissor Man's house, none of them having any proof, but clinging onto the urban legends like moths to a flame, desperately looking for some sort of answer about the missing children. Not even giving him a chance to explain himself, the mob invaded the Scissor Man's house and brutally beat him, forcing him to confess what he did to the children. He proclaimed his innocence and begged them not to kill him, but they refused to listen. They saw the shears he so loved, sitting right there on the kitchen table. It's unknown who delivered the final blow, but the story ends with the Scissor Man getting killed by his own shears, his throat snipped open and him bleeding out on his living room floor. Years have gone by since then and the missing children were never found, but the disappearances stopped. For a while at least. The children who went to school while the Scissor Man worked there grew up and had their own children, and that's when the disappearances started once more. It was around that time that the townsfolk realized what a terrible mistake the parents have made in murdering the wrong person, but it was too late. A new tale emerged that the ghost of the Scissor Man was still around, seeking revenge against the descendants of all those who were responsible for his death. Although the names of townsfolk responsible were well known, most of the people turned a blind eye to it. They were mortally scared for their own children, afraid that the Scissor Man would come for their child next because of what their parents did. The disappearances happened in unpredictable manners, once a year, once every 2 years, but children would still disappear, despite the precautions the parents and schools took. A lot of the people moved out by the time I was born, and many others who stayed accepted the fact that their child might end up missing one day if the Scissor Man so willed it. Not even 3 months after Matt told me about the story, he went missing. The last time I saw him, we were saying goodbye after school and making plans for our next sleepover on the weekend. I never saw him again. I grew up with the tale of the Scissor Man, fearing every day when returning from school that I would hear the snipping of those garden shears, before the Scissor Man snatched me, or worse. And then the disappearances stopped once again, for a few years. The people hoped that it was finally over, however the lack of children going missing was only a reprieve. In time, the story remained even as I grew up, as an urban legend. And then the disappearances started once more, when I got to my adult age. It's strange how the town got accustomed to it, as if it were a completely normal thing. No one talked about it, since they felt as if even mentioning the Scissor Man's name would bring about his presence and put one's family in danger. I stayed in town and found a relatively good job, and despite having to do a lot of overtime, I didn't complain. Life went on as normally as it could under such circumstances. And then one evening a few months ago, I was sitting at home and flipping through TV channels when the news popped up. The screen changed to a reporter standing in front of the elementary school with a microphone in his hand. He said, "The police are saying they are a step closer to finding the notorious Scissor Man." This got my attention. I leaned forward, transfixed on the TV. I spent a portion of my teenage life obsessing over the Scissor Man, trying to dig up any meager scraps of information available on him. The man on the TV continued. "The serial killer known as the Scissor Man has been terrorizing our small town for more than 30 years, and despite the efforts of the police, he was never found. However, with the newest evidence emerging, the police say it is only a matter of time before the suspect slips again and brings himself closer to being caught." I found myself gripping the armrest of the sofa with a feverish grip. Could this be it? The reign of the Scissor Man finally coming to an end? I continued listening to the man on the news. The police suspect that the murderer is inside the town and is considered to be extremely cunning. He could be hiding anywhere, even inside your homes. Make sure to lock your doors and windows whenever you leave your homes or before going to bed. There was a muffled thump from my basement. I felt my heart beginning to race. I turned down the TV and perked up my ears. It was unnervingly quiet. It felt as if whatever had made that noise was aware of how loud it was and was now trying to be quiet. I slowly stood up, heart thumping in my chest. I approached the basement door and put my ear against it. I couldn't hear anything. No, there was something in there, but I just couldn't tell what. It was too quiet and inconsistent. I mustered the courage I had and turned the key, swinging the door open. I was met with the faces of bound and gagged children. One of the children lay motionless on the floor, his features indiscernible from the dark. Tears streamed down the other children's faces, and at the sight of me they whimpered even louder. I put my finger over my lips in a shush motion and said, "Don't make a sound, or there will be more snipping." I smiled and closed the door, locking them up again. I would need to be more careful not to leave traces for the police to find from now on. I glanced to the right, towards the blood-stained garden shears on the shoe stand. The same ones that my grandfather and father used before me.